Hey everyone, it's just another day in the life of a military wife, and oh my word, this week the topic has picked itself because I feel like it would be remiss of me not to discuss what's going down with Ukraine and everything. If you haven't heard about it yet, buckle up, because the one thing that kept popping into my head was the quote from Vicini in Princess Bride. Never get involved in a land war in Asia. This might not exactly be land war in Asia routine, but it's pretty dang close. So, that's anecdotal. Today will not be anecdotal, but whether you are for, against, informed, or not, let's just, dig on in. I am your host, Sam Wolf, and you are listening to Life of a Military Wife. Okay, so apologies in advance. My puppy is on one today, and so are most of the neighborhood dogs. I'm going to work around it, but there might be barking in the background. That said, I strive in this podcast to bring you information and allow you to draw your own conclusions. And there's a lot that has happened, and a lot of people have opinions on how it's all going down and what was said and why. But basically where I'm starting is the President of the United States, President Biden, had a press conference last week, and he said some things, and how you feel about what he said is your deal. However, there's definitely been an international reaction to what has been said, and that is what I'm going to cover, is the international reaction to what was said and what has followed those statements. So, in the press conference, President Biden said, I think what you're going to see is that Russia will be held accountable if it invades, and it depends on what it does. It's not one thing if it's a minor incursion, and then we end up having a fight about what to do and not to do, etc. That statement has led to all sorts of uncomfy feelings, especially from the Ukrainians. Anyway, the president of Ukraine stated that there are no minor incursions, which I agree. If it was our country that was being talked about, pretty sure that even if you took Key West, I would be a little cranky. But just the Florida Keys, not cool with that. Pearl Harbor, we didn't take a minor incursion lightly last time a military tried to waltz into our country. So, I can see why the president of Ukraine stated that there are no minor incursions. That said, to directly quote what he tweeted out, he stated, "We want to remind the great powers that there are no minor incursions and small nations, just as there are no minor casualties and little grief from the loss of loved ones. I say this as the president of a great power." And I can see his point. Anyway, but that's basically what caused a lot of the international reaction that has been happening. And there were some statements put out by the White House to clarify what was said, but you can go back and look at those yourself. I've got a lot of ground to cover, so we're just going to move on. Later, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki was asked questions, and this was on January 4th, and she responded to the reporter. This was the reporter's direct quoted question. If Americans are still in Ukraine and things start happening with Russia, are they pretty much on their own? That's what the reporter asked her. Her direct quoted response was, well, we are conveying very clearly now that now is the time to leave, that there are a means to do that. Of course, there's commercial airlines. You can depart overland. There's obviously the embassy there to provide assistance. And this is very similar to what we did in Ethiopia, Kazakhstan, and many other countries over the course of the last several decades. But there is not an intention or a let's get this last sentence right. But there is not any intention or a plan for any military evacuation. Yay. That makes me feel a little uncomfortable because that sounds really similar to what happened last year in Afghanistan. We still have 100 U.S. citizens minimum stuck in Afghanistan. The Taliban is holding them hostage. They are refusing to let them leave the country. They've been abandoned by the State Department. Because there wasn't the plan. Okay. Moving on. Next. So there's just been a lot going down, and Boris Johnson, Prime Minister of the UK, weighed in on what was going on. And he said that the intelligence is very clear that there are 60 Russian battle groups on the borders of Ukraine. The plan for a lightning war that could take out Kiev is one that everybody can see. We need to make it very clear to the Kremlin, to Russia, that would be a disastrous step. And so what we're saying is that the UK is leading on creating the package of economic sanctions, working with partners around the world, and I will be talking to them this afternoon. Basically, Boris Johnson has decided, or at least announced, that he is going to stand up, step up, take some leadership, and start putting together deterrents so that Russia doesn't feel comfortable waltzing in to Ukraine. So, next, the Ukrainian foreign minister said on Monday, so this week, Monday this week, while respecting the rights of foreign nations to decide on safety and security of their diplomatic missions, we consider that this step by the United States is premature and stems from excessive caution. This is in regard to the United States has decided to pull out the family members, the dependents, and the support people from the embassy. They basically, it's made the Ukraine uncomfortable because we're pulling people out already. And that, again, draw your own conclusion on what kind of message that sends. But the Ukraine itself, its foreign minister specifically, and I'm going to pass on trying to pronounce his name because I'm struggling with it. Again, he says that he feels it's premature and stems from excessive caution. So there were no radical changes in the last little bit, and it just, yeah. So in response to what the United States announced, the EU responded that it would not be following the United States in the withdrawal of its diplomats and diplomatic families, so the families of the diplomats, from Ukraine, and as well as there was no need to dramatize the situation while talks with Russia were still ongoing. And yeah, I can see why that would. The EU has decided that they are going to pursue a different course of action, and that's really their prerogative. The statements that have been made have been getting reactions here in the United States as well as internationally. And Representative Michael McCall from Texas, who is on the Foreign Affairs Committee, warned Sunday, so this last Sunday, we need joint exercises in Poland, the Baltic states, Romania, Bulgaria to show Putin that we're serious right now. He doesn't see we're serious, and that is why the buildup is taking place. I think this all started with Afghanistan and the unconditional surrender to the Taliban. When he saw weakness, weakness invites aggression. We saw that with Chamberlain and Hitler. Reagan talked about peace through strength. And that, again, reading all these different things, hearing all these different points, it's got me thinking. And there are a couple points that need to be brought up. First of all, historically speaking, Russia views the Ukraine kind of as part of the Russian cultural area. I don't know how it depends on how familiar you are with Ukraine and Russia. They both use the Cyrillic alphabet, however, they speak different languages. The Ukraine has many points in history been controlled by Russia, but they do view themselves as an independent nation, and they have been an independent nation for quite a bit now. So there's that. That's part of that internal struggle. And the other part is that really the whole situation in Afghanistan still hasn't been resolved. So, I mean, the message that was sent was definitely less than ideal with the way that Afghanistan was handled. And so there's just a lot of factors. And it's important to also note that the United States is not the only one at the negotiation table. Like I mentioned before, the EU is still negotiating with Russia on this. The UK is now stepping up and taking a more active role in the negotiations with Russia. This doesn't just hinge on the United States, but the United States is a key factor in NATO, and that goes to the second claim that Russia is making. Russia is making the claim that the whole reason why they're getting defensive is they don't want the Ukraine joining NATO. And maybe that would be a valid concern if there was currently an application on the table for the Ukraine to join NATO, but there isn't, and there hasn't been in over 10 years. So they really don't have a leg to stand on with that excuse. And that's the excuse that at least the common one that has been presented by the Russians, is that they're worried about the Ukraine joining NATO. Well, that's not really even on the table right now. So it just doesn't, their justification for what they're doing is not authentic. That said, the Pentagon has now announced that they are readying over 8,500 military personnel to be ready. Basically, they're prepping people. They're prepping people to go. And to go, it's not been very clear as where and what, but they're prepping. And OPSEC is something, operational security is something we have talked about before on this channel. I don't expect the United States military and the Pentagon and the White House to lay out every little nitty-gritty detail of every little bit that they're doing behind the closed doors. That doesn't make sense militarily or diplomatically. You have to have some room to negotiate. Mixed signals are not helpful. And I know misdirection is a tactic that can be used. But peace through strength. Reagan didn't completely have that wrong. When we look unified with our neighbors and our allies, it's taken more seriously. And I'm just going to give you kind of a little bit of an analogy here. And again, excuse Puppy, she's been on one. I've already had to retape multiple segments because of her barking, so I'm just going to plow through this. But here's my analogy. Here's what I want to convey. So let's take this back to a familial unit. And I get that I'm not at war with my children. Don't think that by any means. I'm not at war with my children. But when parents have a united front, the kids tend to be in line more. Very frequently, and this is something that happens in military homes a lot, the military spouse will head out for training, deployment, XYZ. They're gone. They're out of the picture for a bit. And then they come back. And sometimes the rules and procedures and just the way things operate will have fluctuated in the time they were gone. And they're also out of the habit of, working through things as a team and that sort of stuff. And so it takes a little while to, transition back into, parental unitness, team mode. Anyway, and so there are situations where I would never say my wonderful children have ever done this. But let's just say there are situations in which the children will approach the military spouse who's been gone and say, "Hey, daddy or mommy, whoever, can I go ride my bike? Or can I have XYZ thing?" And sometimes the military spouse who's been gone will just yes or no or straight up answer. Not knowing sometimes that maybe previously that child just possibly went to mommy first, the parental unit that isn't in the military, and said, "Mommy, I want to go ride my bike." And mommy said, "You haven't done your chores, and you have to do your chores before you can ride your bike." But because daddy has been in the field or gone for a couple months, maybe he forgot that was one of the rules, that they have to do their chore before they can ride their bike. And daddy will say, "Sure, it's a nice day. The kids are wanting to get physical exercise and be outside, so why not?" However, that can demonstrate weakness or a lack of cohesiveness in the parental unit. And I would never say that my angelic, wonderful children have ever exploited perceived lack of cohesiveness in the parental unit of our family. Never. I'm just saying it happens sometimes. We all know the scenario. And so that's really kind of the concept. Maybe that's the most practical, down-to-earth, everyday way for me to explain this. We have a semi-parental unit, or let's just say we have NATO. We have an organization of allies. And a united front is always stronger. Just like when parents are on the same page with doing chores before playing, or, no candy before dinner, whatever. Whenever that parental unit is cohesive, has that united front, is on the same page, however you want to say it, there is a strength that comes from that. And not only is there a strength that comes from that, but it can be, in and of itself, a deterrent to conflict. Because if the kids know that mom and dad are going to give the same answer, and they already know what the answer is, and they know it's not going to change, they probably aren't going to fight it. They're probably just going to be like, fine, I'm going to do my chores and then I'll ask to ride my bike. And that works diplomatically and internationally in other with other social units too. This is why I've talked about boundaries before. And here's where I bring this kind of back to what I know and what we've discussed. When we have healthy boundaries that we have set, when we have clearly communicated our intentions, our goals, and our expectations, and then we present a united front with whatever unit we are a part of to whomever we are interacting with and dealing with, you are more likely to see success. Because just having that clear boundary and that clear understanding of expectations and consequences regarding that boundary, and then showing a unified front, can be, in and of itself, a deterrent. Now, juxtapose it with what's going on right now, and, well, you might see where some concern resides. So, at this point, time will tell what direction this will all go. And there's a lot of ramifications for decisions that are being made. I happen to know firsthand that there are lots of organizations, including schools and churches, that have people from the United States, U.S. citizens, that they've sent over to the Ukraine, that are in the Ukraine right now. Because most people are aware that study abroad programs happen. There's internships that happen. There's expats. There's people in the United States who work in other countries. And in addition to that, I know that there are churches that have missionaries over there as well. So how this will pan out, what will happen, who knows? I personally, like I've said before, I am a Christian. I believe in prayer. And I am definitely going to be praying for this situation to resolve in the safest way possible. And I will try to keep you all up to date and informed on what's going down. Like I said, current update on Afghanistan, still over 100 American citizens trapped. So you can do the math yourself and figure out how long they've been stuck there. Currently, according to the United Nations, Afghanistan is approaching a famine situation or has reached a famine situation. And according to the United Nations, they are expecting over 1 million people to starve to death this winter. And we still have American citizens trapped. Just saying. So, that was kind of heavy. Again, I want to help bring information and perspective on what's going on in the world and what goes on with military life. And I hope I have done that. I just have to say that the reason why I do this podcast is for you. It's for my listeners. I've been asked so many questions for so many years by so many military families or their family members of people who've got family in the military who are just trying to understand our perspective, understand what our life is like, understand how to support their family who are in the military, and just negotiate the crazy. And when stuff like this starts happening on the world stage, you'll get a lot of political commentators throwing in their 2 cents. Some of them are vets. Some of them have connections with the military, and some of them have their pulse on what's going down. But quite a few of them are stating their perspectives as civilian citizens of this country, which they are totally entitled to do and are completely valid. That as military families, we have unique perspectives on these situations. We cannot always express our perspectives on these situations because we respect the operational security of our country. However, there are news sources, there are resources. It's important to be informed, and it's important to stop and think about what we're reading and how it applies to different aspects of our country and the international climate in which we live. So, that said, I am really grateful when I get feedback from listeners that the information I have been able to share with you has helped you. And I hope that the information I share continues to be of a benefit to you all. This is why I do it. I don't do it for kicks and giggles. Honestly, I feel a little weird sometimes just sitting talking to my dog while I record this. But, it's worth it if it helps you guys. So, that all said, you are listening to Life of a Military Wife, and I am your host, Sam Wolf.